Hello, welcome to today's session. I am Magdalena Kaiser, the Director of Public Relations for Wine Marketing Association of Ontario, and we work to share the stories of VQA wines and wine country Ontario. So I'm really excited to be here today. We have been part of the Terroir Symposium for many years, and it was really important for us to be part of this virtual webinar series, which I have been watching, and you've all done an amazing job. So I want to congratulate Terroir first of all. Today's session is about sustainability in Ontario's wine industry. And before we get started, I just wanted to do a little bit of a quick introduction, and then I will be passing it over to our moderator and also the panelists that we have from the Ontario wine industry. And so we're really super excited about that. So first and foremost, I want to also thank Terroir for working with us on this messaging, in the sense that they provided many of you, and hopefully some of you have your packages, those of you living in Ontario that had the Terroir kits. There was a bottle of wine in each of those, and some cheese actually that Terroir paired with your package. So you probably had one of 12 wines, and if you saved your wine and are enjoying it now, then great. It is one of 12 Ontario wineries that are part of Sustainable Winemaking Ontario, and it was great that Terroir could include those in your packages. And I am going to move on to give you just a little bit of a brief outline on sustainability and where things are at in Ontario's wine industry. So for those of you who are from Ontario, one of the most important messages we want to keep telling people is that VQA, and just as a reminder, VQA is a certification for consumers that everything in the bottle is 100% Ontario. Without VQA on the bottle, that's not the case. So we want to remind people that if you are from Ontario, it is the most sustainable choice for you. And that is the case with respect to environment, economy, and our community. You can see the three pillars on the slides that in the case of the economy, every single bottle provides $98.20 back to our economy. And it supports 18,000 jobs in Ontario, and really does cross so many sectors, culturally, agriculturally, in tourism, and with hospitality. And for those of you who are hopefully maybe joining in from around the world, and one of our guests today is from the UK, certainly whatever is your most local source is likely the most sustainable choice, or one of the most sustainable choices. So that's kind of lays the groundwork for us in Ontario. And then once we kind of move to the next level, we also have a certification program that the Ontario Craft Wineries started working on probably about 10 years ago, a little bit more than 10 years ago. It was an industry-led initiative that really had the wineries start looking at what are the ways that we can become more sustainable. And again, their three pillars are intact with respect to environment, economy, and community. And so 3 years ago, they actually evolved this program into a third-party certification. And they did so in collaboration with the Grape Growers of Ontario, so that there are actually several elements to this program. There's the winemaking side from the winery, and also the vineyard side. So again, it's a very complex, well, not complex, but well thought out program with a third-party auditor, and we're excited that currently there are 12 wineries in this program, with a growing number that we will see increase in the coming months. So Sustainable Winemaking Ontario recognizes the wineries and the growers committed to enhancing the environment. As I said, it's the third-party audit, and they undergo an annual audit. They follow best practices around conservation of water, reduction in wastewater, energy efficiency programs, sustainable power, and then of course, again, they produce VQA wines, meaning that everything that they use is 100% Ontario. The 12 sustainable wineries, just to have a quick look at the list here: Chateau de Charmes, Flat Rock, Henry of Pelham, Hidden Bench, Rife, Estate Winery, Struan Winery, Cave Spring Vineyard, Malivoire, Peely Island, Southbrook, and Stratus. And I'm hoping I didn't miss one with my, Pilotary Estates. Sorry, my little webcam is covering my slide there. And so you can see at the bottom section, there are also 5 wineries that have their vineyards certified as well. Eventually, the process right now is what's happening in the industry and with the grape growers and the Ontario craft wineries is that they're working with those wineries to move it under one kind of, everyone in the program will have the certification within both their winery and the vineyard. This is the logo that you will see. Actually, there's kind of 2 logos here. The one on the right, the circle, is what you will see on a bottle. So more of those wineries are putting this certification on the backs of the bottles. And if any of the winemakers who are on this session in a couple of minutes have a bottle of their wine, hopefully, we had recommended that they could just pull that up and show what that looks like. Crossing my fingers that one of them has one. And so the other thing we did want to touch on, though, we are very much focused in this session on talking about Ontario's Sustainable Winemaking Certification. But beyond that, it is also important to understand that a lot of other producers in the world, but certainly Ontario, have done additional certifications, organic certifications. Some that you might see are ProCert or EcoCert. Also Demeter, which is a biodynamic certification, several wineries have that, and LEED certification, which several wineries have that. And so the panelists will also touch on those points with their experiences in those additional and different certifications. So next, I am just going to do a quick introduction on our moderator, Christopher Waters, who is the columnist at the Globe and Mail now. Christopher has a long what I'm not looking for the word, but long history, profile in the Ontario wine industry, and he really has seen what we have done over the years in his past roles in education for Vines magazine and various competitions. He's traveled the world, so he has a good sense of what's going on in other countries with this topic. And so he will be leading us through the discussion with a number of panelists who I'm going to show you on the next slide. So our panelists today, and again, Chris will be interviewing them one by one and kind of do probably a little bit of a broader introduction, is Gabe DeMarco, who is the assistant winemaker at Cave Spring Vineyard, who is, again, been in the industry for many years and very, very dedicated and knowledgeable about the topic. Also, Stephen Gash, who's the general manager at Malivoire Wine Company, and also very informed and been part of developing the sustainable winemaking program at the Ontario Craft Wineries. Also, Matthew Speck, who is from Henry of Pelham, one of the pioneers in the industry, has been working the lands in the Short Hills Bench around their estate for many years and has some great insight for us today. And SPERLING, I'm sure many of you know her as well. She has been a leader in many sustainable practices in winemaking and in the vineyard, and we're really excited to have her here with us today. Dean STOKYA, also very knowledgeable, of course, from Stratus Vineyards, and he is the assistant winemaker, so can give us the perspective from the winemaking, but also worked in the vineyard for many years. So these are all of our winemaker people who were really excited about having today, considering that harvest in Ontario is a little early this year. So we're pulling them away from probably harvesting their sparkling grapes and probably in the case of Matt Speck, maybe his Baco Noir. And then before I forget, and I won't forget, of course, JAMIE GOODE, who has been to Ontario and Canada a number of times. He's internationally acclaimed author and wrote the book on authentic wine and really has a perspective on what is happening globally with sustainable winemaking and how people communicate those things, their practices, and the marketing related to that. So if I can just move to the next slide. I see you there, Chris. I actually for a second, I'm like, is that the picture or is that you? Are you really there? So welcome and thank you for helping us with this panel today.
Thanks so much, Magdalena, and thank you for not calling me old earlier when you were just trying to struggle to put me in my position, my August position in the wine country here. But yes, thank you so much.
I think I was looking for the word resume, and it was just, you know, my mind was just not catching up with my thoughts. So I'm going to leave it to you now, and then I'll see you at the end of the presentation. So thank you very much. And I think you wanted to start with the next slide, so I'm going to switch over to that.
Perfect.
So I'll move that over for you.
Thanks so much. So really excited to talk about Ontario wine, because it's not, well, I see right in front of me the sustainable choice, but for my own trajectory, I was born and raised in St. Catharines, Ontario, and kind of grew up with the wine industry. I got into what I do, writing about wine, because I worked at a winery way back in 1988 when the handful of wineries were basically trying to get a sense of what was really happening in the world and establishing the Vintners Quality Alliance. And so around that time, I remember growing up in St. Catharines, which is the heart, or the industrial heart of the wine country, and the whole idea. I mean, it was an auto industry. That's what the whole community was predicated on. It's now transitioned to wine and culinary and tourism, all these wonderful things that we want to see prosper and grow. But I can remember in the 1970s a campaign that was run where it was kind of a sense of buy the cars your neighbors help build. And I think the wine industry is needing to take a page from that. And I think that's a little bit of what's kind of going on in general with this initiative. And so talking about the pillars, people, planet, but also profit, and profit that governs the community, and profit that actually kind of keeps the industry and everything viable, because you can be as great as you want to be for the planet, and you can be as good as you can be to your labor force and everyone who works there. But if you're not sustainably staying in business, particularly in such a challenging business, vagaries of Mother Nature notwithstanding, now with the whole system of social distancing and pandemic problems layered into it, really just wanted to talk about that. So thanks for that slide. And just to kind of set the tone for what we're about to, I guess, just give you some backstory. Sustainability, I mean, sure, the industry's always been embracing these concepts, but the notion of really kind of being formal about it started, as Magdalena mentioned, about 2003 or so. The whole idea to kind of, how do we become more environmentally sustainable? And what I like about it, in the same way I like the formation of the winemaking regulations, when they set up the Vintners Quality Alliance in 1988, that was the kind of TSN turning point. That's a local sports, the national sports broadcaster that always kind of pivots where the games went, the TSN turning point for the game. Well, the TSN turning point for the industry was the VQA, and was setting this up and making vinifera vines, European vines, the formation, the foundation for quality winemaking that would be understood globally and recognized globally and respected globally. And so the notion that founding the VQA, the notion was to look at best practices all around the world, adopt those standards, and then adapt them to what makes sense in Ontario's cool climate growing environment, and what makes sense for a fledgling industry. And so the sustainability code came about the same way. It's just, let's take a look at what makes sense. And so, to be clear, just in case there are people where this is a novel notion, and God knows that Ontario or wine people in general can be so far in front of their face and not actually explain that, what we're talking about for sustainable certification programs. They take into account everything involved in wine production, the whole system, assessing the economic, assessing the environmental, assessing the social aspects, and not just the resulting product. It's the big picture. And so there's a tremendous amount of variability on what applies, depending not least on a winery's scale, its size, its ambition. And so it's really hard to define. And that's one of the things I'm hoping that we're going to talk about today. But just to make some more mile markers along the way, 1988, I mentioned VQA and then the jump start to modern winemaking. But 2007 is when the Sustainable Winemaking Ontario Certified program was introduced to the public. And the whole idea, recognize wineries, as Magdalena mentioned, recognize the wineries and the growers committed to enhancing environmental needs, using sustainable practices in their wineries and their vineyard. It does broadcast itself as a forward-facing aspect. Just to look, I love a good prop. And so there it is, right beside the VQA emblem, the green leaf. And that's what, here's a bottle of Cave Spring 2019 Pinot Gris. If I get thirsty, it's right there. Certified wineries are identified with that emblem. But so as we are going to hear from the winemakers on the panel, because they live this day in, day out, they helped establish it, they have helped codify it. The Sustainable Winemaking Ontario Certified program shows how sustainability is kind of ingrained to their daily operations. And so practices might include water management, wastewater management, energy management. A lot of these things aren't sexy to consumers. They're not necessarily sexy to media, but they are so germane to what a foundation and a critical path forward to making a wine industry really thrive. And so 2007, those programs are introduced. 2017, the whole program gets handed over to a third party for auditing. Same thing happened with VQA, because it's not critical, or it's not so important to have an industry kind of self-police itself. It's way more important to have somebody else actually say this certification is valid. This actually means something, and it actually merits your attention. And so today's session, really, here we are in 2020, we're really kind of just bringing this into light. We are looking to build awareness about what actually is going on and what's happening and why this matters, because basically we're living at a point in time where consumers are becoming ever more conscious of choices and the products that they choose, but there's overall a lack of familiarity to what sustainability actually means or really looks like. So let's spend some time exploring that. Let's spend some time figuring out what sustainability means in wine, what it means to Ontario winemakers, and why it should matter to wine lovers, and not even just people who are imbibing the product, to the greater community around us. Why is sustainability the word of the day? Why is it dovetail so nicely into collaboration, which is the overarching theme of terroir? And so that's my piece on it. What I thought we would be crucial to do is, before we set our narrowed focus in on Ontario, let's actually take a look at a global perspective, and let's introduce and bring in someone who's walked that and lived that and explored so much about sustainability, to a point back in 2011, JAMIE GOODE helped co-authored a book, one of the earliest books that actually looked at sustainability in winemaking, called Authentic Wine Towards a Natural and Sustainable Winemaking Practices. It's such a new and novel thing in so many ways, and it's so hard to pin down because its applications are myriad, but I think it's so important, and I think Mr. Goode, my friend and colleague, would agree. And so I don't know how to set this table for you, Jamie, but explain it all in 6 minutes.
I apologize, my video is not working. I know you should never begin with an apology, but I think actually it's sparing you quite a good deal of poor visual content. So really, sustainability, I think, is an area that's interested me a great deal, and I've spent the last number of years, well until March, traveling the world and visiting the world's wine regions, and there's been a massive change over a short period of time. But I think that one of the issues we've got to face is that sustainability has had practically zero traction with consumers. It's a word that's very important, but it doesn't have a definition. It's not as good a slogan or banner as organics. And this is really important, because what organics and biodynamics has done in the wine world is there's been a banner that people can gather under. They know exactly what it is. It's basically a uniform certification that there's a degree of harmony. If someone says they're farming organically in France, they'll be following pretty much the same rules as somebody farming organically in Prince Edward County. It's that sort of banner quality. It's almost a brand of agricultural branding that's proved quite successful and quite durable. Although I would say that they've been very, organics and biodynamics in the wine scene has been very visual and very noticeable, but it's not so far affected a large number of vineyards. I mean, there are I forget the figure, but it's something like 7.5 million hectares of vines all around the world. There's a lot of them, and very few of the vineyards are being farmed organically or biodynamically. So sustainability, I think, is really important. Look, vineyards are inherently problematic when it comes to their environmental credentials, because first of all, they're a monoculture. They share that with all other crop species, basically, makes them vulnerable to insect pests. They're, most of the vineyards around the world are single species, Vitis vinifera, in all its myriad varieties, but Vitis vinifera lacks resistance to powdery and downy mildew. So you have to spray. You simply can't grow a vineyard without spraying. And then, of course, you've got the other fungal problem, botrytis, which causes problems. And we've got the fact that, competition from weeds has led to excessive herbicide use. Then we've got dry regions around the world where water use is becoming a big issue. And then, of course, every year you're taking off a crop and you're pruning quite drastically, which is taking out nutrition effectively, that it's taking something out of the system that somehow has to be put back there. And so in the past, the solution was really a very primitive chemical one, to use insecticides, herbicides, to use excessive fungicides of all manner and type, and simply the whole thing wasn't sustainable. It was a big problem. And I think that things are changing, and things are changing quite fast. But really, the definition of sustainability we need to use is the one that I heard from at a conference in New Zealand last year. A guy called Jeff Thorpe from Riverside Nurseries said, basically, the only sustainability that is meaningful is if we say, can we carry on doing this, what we're doing exactly now, for another 100 years? Or can we carry on doing it for another 1,000 years? And if you can't say yes, if you can't carry on doing it, then really you're sustainable in name only. So true sustainability means we have to be able to do what we're doing for many generations with no deterioration in quality of the systems that we're farming. And on that count, perhaps organics and biodynamics aren't truly sustainable. Yes, there are a vast improvement on some of the chemical viticulture that was flying around in the 70s and 80s. But when you're tilling the soil and you're using copper as a fungicide, is that sustainable? That's a good question. So talking about sustainability systems, there's been some really interesting progress in New Zealand. In 1995, they introduced Sustainable Wines New Zealand. And what they did was very clever. Is basically they've said to people, if you want to show your wines at a New Zealand wine growers sponsored event, or you want to host journalists, with New Zealand wine growers, help, then you have to be a member of Sustainable Wine Growing New Zealand. You have to be certified. And I think they've got something like 98% of their vineyards are now certified sustainable. And this has, I think, raised, it's changed a lot of the practices. I don't think that, it's really had a marked effect on pesticide and herbicide use. It's had an effect on the way that people approach spraying fungicides. It's been criticised in some quarters for having a low barrier to entry, that this is the basic minimum that people should be doing. But the counter to that is it's actually brought people on board. And a sustainability system is no use at all if it isn't bringing the majority of growers in the region concerned on board. It's getting people to start that journey. And the key thing is to see that as a beginning of a journey. The destination isn't necessarily organics. I know a lot of people think of it as a progression from conventional to sustainable to organics, but I don't think that's, I'm not knocking organics here because I'm a real believer in organics, but it's like a good sustainability system goes a little bit further. In some ways, you're considering things that aren't considered in organic certification, and you mentioned some of them earlier, like quality of waterways, providing areas for refuge areas for beneficial insects and that sort of thing. It's and also the human capital has to come in here as well. I mean, I think you have to bring people working in the vineyards into the certification system for sustainability. South Africa's had their own system since 2000. They're certified by the Wine and Spirit Board. In France, a new system that has come out of previous existing systems called HVE, or HVE, and that has 3 different levels, and that's quite a good certification system. I think it's bringing people on board who I don't think would have adopted organics. That would have been too much of a step up, and it's bringing people into this conversation. It's bringing people, once people are starting to monitor what they're doing, I mean, half the battle is won. Once you're record keeping and you're monitoring what you're doing, even if the standard for certification isn't as high as we'd like it to be, the fact that people are monitoring what they're doing, I think, is a really positive step. And you see, this all seems really simple until you take the perspective of a commercial grower, and this is your daily work, and you've got to make money because sustainability is financial as well. This has to work economically, and I think that there's 2 ways of looking at this. One is to try and raise the brand of sustainable to the point that consumers will start to pay more for sustainably produced produce, as they have with organic vegetables, not necessarily organic wine. It's funny because people, I think of wine as maybe not being very healthy for you because of all the government messages. So why would the way that the wine is produced be important in the same way that your potatoes or your carrots are produced? Because wine is being seen as something bad. So I think there's been a lack of resonance between the message, well, this has been organically produced. Well, it's wine, it's wine. It's like it's got alcohol in it. What does it matter? So I think that's one of the ways of looking at it. Can you get consumers to pay more by raising the brand of sustainable, making it credible, making it a banner? The other thing is to see it as to have some sort of consumer backlash against people who aren't certified sustainable, because after all, there's a moral imperative on all of us to, if whatever we do, we should leave things in a better state for the next generation rather than leaving them a tab to pick up. But it would be morally wrong for us to leave the next generation with an environmental tab that we couldn't be bothered to pay. So in that sense, I think sustainability is a moral imperative, and people who aren't being sustainable, I think, are causing real issues. And then, of course, we have the whole issue of carbon footprint, and is that part of the conversation as well? Because I think once you start introducing carbon footprint discussions into the conversation, that shifts things slightly, and I think it should be part of the discussion. Ultimately, though, the biggest challenge is the broader economics of the wine industry, because if people aren't making money, they cut corners. It's cheaper to use herbicide than it is to work the soil, for instance. So if people aren't making money and people aren't paying the right sort of prices for grapes, it's very hard to point the fingers at growers and say, well, you're not farming well enough. Something structural in the wine industry has to change, where everybody is seen as part of this partnership and where it's equitable for everyone. But yeah, I think it's been really encouraging seeing the scope of change and the pace of change. But the main thing is that not just to sort of like rubber stamp what's already happening by giving certification for basically a beginner's standard of doing things the right way, and then people being complacent after that. I think that would be a shame. I think it has to be seen as the beginning point in a journey, not a destination.
No, well said. I think one of the things that usually strikes me about these conversations is that yes, there's a consumer aspect of the misunderstanding, but I think for so long, and it might contrast what you were saying a bit earlier, but generally people think of grape growing and winemaking as pretty holistic and sound, and don't really know until recently some of the vagaries of that. And so these types of certifications, I think, weren't necessary to the degree that they are now. And so I'm not sure if there's a question in that. It's just like, but I think, you know, it's an important time to be having these kinds of conversations. And I think it's an important time for Ontario to step up, because it's no longer a case of people thinking that this is a beneficial add-on. It's going to have to be ingrained to wine going forward. Do you not think?
So are you saying, I guess, what are you suggesting, that people are kind of, we've got a free pass at the moment, and for the last few years, because people think wine growing, they think of beautiful vineyards and it's very holistic and very healthy, and it's like wine, I guess they think wine's all made very naturally and it's very pure. And so in the sense we've had a free pass, people haven't been looking behind the scenes, you know, to see what's been going on. And after all, the vineyards with the bare soil, you know, that have been nuked by herbicide, they can often look very pretty, you know. But so maybe if I'm kind of follow your reasoning, which I'm kind of getting into a bit, is the idea that at some stage consumers are going to come around the back and see what goes on behind the scenes in vineyards and in wineries. So we really ought to get our act in order before that happens. Because I think if they're to do it now, there's still stuff that's happening in vineyards that maybe we'd be less happy about people talking about, you know. There's still stuff going on that's not, you know, treating the vineyard as an agro ecosystem, but seeing it as merely a medium for growing the crop plant. So really this sustainability, yes, it needs to be done, but maybe it needs to be done reasonably briskish. So when people do start asking those questions, because consumers don't really show a lot of interest in that at the moment, then you can say, well, look, this is actually really very sustainable. It's truly sustainable. There's been a lot of thought put into this, and this is what we're doing and why we're doing it. And we can carry on doing this. And if anything, you know, with this whole concept of regenerative farming, we're actually improving the quality of the soils, not degrading them.
No, it's really fascinating, and we could keep going down this line of inquiry, but I do want you to hold your place. Sadly, we can't see you holding your place, but I did want to bring Stephen Gash from Malivore, general manager of Malivore, but he's kind of wearing two hats in this conversation, because he also is going to help give us some perspective on what was happening as we brokered. And I say we, it's the collective we. I guess I wasn't involved. I just communicate about it. But what was happening as all of this planning was coming to fruition. And I guess my question to you, Stephen, as someone you know who, as a general manager of a winery, not someone who's you know, getting ink-stained hands or juice-stained hands on a daily basis, is ultimately the goal of Ontario Sustainable Winemaking Certification transparency for our consumers?
Yeah, it's a great question, Chris. Yeah, I think it certainly is, and you know, I'm thinking so much about what you and Jamie were talking about in terms of this being a journey, and the fact that we really are. These are early days, right? And so when we think about the program, as both you and Magdalena have noted, you know, we began in 2007 in the early days. It really took on a greater role in 2017 with the certification and the third-party audit. And I'm most excited about what's been happening in the past 3 years, because in 2019, we got a brand and a logo with the green leaf that you held up, and I'm going to do the same. Can you see it? Let me see. There it is.
It is.
That's on the gaming. But we didn't have a consumer-facing message before, right? So we have wineries who are doing their work. They're part of the program. The consumer has no message. And I think this was a really exciting development. And you know, we saw it in food, right? People were paying more attention to what they put into their bodies and where things come from, and they were asking more questions. It's slowly, as Jamie noted too, moving over to wine. It's not huge yet, and I think that that is a great opportunity that's been mentioned. We want to be a part of this, and we want to have momentum and scale before we're caught off guard. So the consumer's looking for transparency, and they're looking for reassurance. And with our logo on the bottle, they can be assured of those things, right? I mean, it makes it clear and easy to understand that this bottle of wine is part of the certification program for winemaking in Ontario. And I think the brand is really just beginning to get out there. So it's going to start showing up on shelves at the LCBO. Wineries are using them on their websites. You're going to see them at the wineries. It's in the Wine Country Ontario travel guide. And then in terms of this journey, which is a great way to look at it, I mean, let's think aspirationally about this, right? I mean, there are 12 wineries who are part of this certification right now, and there are like 160 in Ontario, right? Huge, huge potential, huge opportunity for us to grow this program. And it's the right thing to do, right? It's the right thing for our environment. It's the right thing for our communities. It's the right thing for our soils. It puts us greater in touch with our process in terms of being accountable and documenting. I mean, these are some of the words that people have used, and they're all perfectly apply to the hallmarks of what this program is. I mean, you know, when you think about all of the pieces that go into running a winery, from the soil to the bottle to the shelf, I mean, when you are in tune with those in a greater way, and the Sustainable Certification Program forces you to do that, there are loads of insights and benefits. And so we want to grow this membership for Ontario wineries. We want to grow it quickly. And I think for wineries, it's really a question of today and not tomorrow, right? To think of it that way. Now is the time to join the certification. And then for consumers, I think the message is going to be articulated really clearly, which is if you're looking to support a VQA winery that is sustainable, look for the logo first and foremost. And the green leaf on the bottle will give you that assurance and transparency that you're looking for. So it's a big journey. We've just started, I think, but I'm excited about where we're going to go for the future. And I'm sitting here right now, as everyone said, we're deep into harvest. We're hand harvesting Pinot Noir for Rosé today, and Pinot Gris for Pinot Gris. So.
No, well said. Magdalena mentioned that there's a move afoot to blend instead of having two separate trajectories or certifications, to bring it together. What are the challenges, or if any, to codifying that under one umbrella?
Yeah, and I think that that is a key development, and where we want to be really quickly with this. I think the challenge is just articulating to people the benefits of this program, and letting them know that now is the time to act for all the reasons that we've talked about. So, you know, there's a way of doing things that people are quite comfortable with, and you need to say to them, you know, this is not about money, because we made the barrier to entry in the program. It's not about that. It's $500, something like that. It's very inexpensive. Sure, there's rigor attached to it, and you're going to be held accountable. But as some of the other panelists, I'm sure, will unpack for us, is that there are tangible benefits, not only for the environment and ultimately the consumer, but for your business, right? Whether you be a grower or whether you be a winery. And in the case of Malabar, for example, we're both, right? We farm our own land and farm our own grapes. We don't contract that out to someone else. And so that has to be a part of our future, Chris, and we really want to get there quickly. So I think we're just going to keep beating the pavement hard and walking into vineyards and having those conversations with people. And, you know, they start now, right?
No, for sure. And so if we do, if we have a solid hour ahead of us, maybe we can get up to 13 wineries codified by the end of it. It's
It's like a telethon, right? Let's see if we can get another by the end of the session.
It's like we'll start yelling timpani like Jerry Lewis used to yell, and let's get that number up. But no, Thanks for your time. Please stand by because we're going to have questions. But I did, based on what Jamie was saying, talking about the vineyard being one of the catalysts or one of the biggest challenges to sustainability. On that note, I wanted to bring in Matt Speck from Henry Pelham. I'm always giving him a different title, Vice President of viticulture. But basically of the trio of specs, the one who spends most of his time and energy on the growing side of the equation, and hopefully it'll be much more sustainable when we get to see Matt's smiling, happy face. Maybe he's run out to grab some.
Give me a sec here. Just gotta unthing my webcam again. How do we do this?
Pay no attention to the man behind the camera icon.
I'll get it here in a second. Here we go.
There we go. Welcome, sir. And back.
And back. What happened? Give me a second.
There we go. I guess it's in simple terms. What does the sustainability initiative mean to what you do day to day at Henry Pelham?
Yeah, thanks, Chris. I think when I think about sustainability, I mean, I really like a number of the things that Jamie was speaking, making points that he was making actually, because I think of one of the challenges of sustainability is the branding or messaging of it. It is a more complicated message than organic or biodynamic. It's been harder to brand and get that message to consumers, what it is, what it means. Fortunately for me, I mean, I run the winery and own the winery with my two brothers, and that's a marketing issue. So my brothers handle the marketing and messaging side of things. I'm very fortunate my role at the winery is to look after our vineyards and our wine production and winemaking side. And on that front, sustainability is a very easy concept to embrace. We're fortunate as a winery that makes premium, authentic Appellation wines only. Embracing sustainability is not a dilemma that other businesses or forms of agriculture might have. Because we don't have to choose between the health of our environment and profitability of our business. They actually are self-reinforcing in the case of the type of wines that we make, and that makes it very easy. I mean, best practices make better wine. Better wine sells. It sells at a better price, and therefore it's self-reinforcing. It's more profitable ultimately. We're a family-owned business as well, so we own our vineyards. Our most significant investments that we make are not in our wine tanks or buildings. It's actually in our vineyards, our land, our soil, our vines. Those are our single largest investments that we make as a company, as a family, and they're also the most long-term investments that we make. These plants, we have plants that are approaching 40 years old now that are producing amazing wines, producing better wines as the vines get older. If they're well managed. Healthy, well managed vines in a healthy environment with healthy soils, well looked after, produce better wines, and they live longer. They live like people, like well looked after in a healthy environment. So we want plants like that. It's self-reinforcing. But I'm actually now getting old enough, and we just planted a vineyard this spring. I'm planting a vineyard that's if it's well looked after, will outlive me. It'll still be producing wines when I'm long gone. Hopefully my children or my nieces, nephews will be looking after those plants. So I mean, the wine industry, that's interesting. We're in an industry, I think not every agricultural industry or just industry in general is fortunate enough to not have to make an and or choice between being good stewards of our land. It's self-reinforcing. Being good stewards of the land, having healthy vines makes better wine. It's a self-fulfilling situation. And we look very long-term. I mean, there aren't many industries that look out 10, 20, 30, 40 years in the future when we make an investment. But in the wine industry you do. I think though that, to be fair though, it's a challenge for agriculture. Like we're fortunate, like we're in a type of agriculture where consumers, while they may not know what sustainable is, I think that is going to be a more difficult message over time. I think we can get it across, but consumers do pay attention to where wine comes from. Now, appellation means something, place means something, and then your brand is recognized. We're not a commodity. If we're growing canola, I don't think the consumer has any idea. If you're in the commodity end of food production, it's a much bigger challenge or a dilemma to try and embrace these practices, because you may not be financially rewarded for it. But with wine, even if sustainability is not yet very well understood, good wine is understood by consumers. Consumers seek out, and we have writers like yourself, Christopher, who write about wines that they enjoy, that they think are good, and they communicate that to consumers. I don't think there's a canola writer that I'm aware of, or a barley writer. I mean, this is difficult for those types of agriculture. So we know that if we make good wine, people will recognize that they enjoy it, and they can come back and they can find it again on the shelf because of our brand, or we communicate that place where these grapes came from. We know that if our vines are healthy and well looked after, healthy vines produce better fruit, makes better wine. It's self-fulfilling, but we can be rewarded with the price of the bottle on shelf. And so it's a fortunate to be in that part of agriculture, the part of agriculture that we're in. It makes it a relatively easy choice, and we can make those investments long term. So some of the choices you make, I mean, sustainability is picking from a number of good ideas. That's also what I like about it. I like organic and biodynamic in many ways, but what I like about sustainable is it's not exclusive to good ideas. Sustainability can pick best in class ideas from a number of baskets of options out there, including technology, which is, I think we're embracing technology is probably the most effective way to get your sustainability score up over the long haul. And what I like about sustainability is you can choose from all the baskets of great ideas that are out there. You can choose the best ones that best work for you in your scenario as a business, but also in our environment, which is different. Wine grapes grown in Niagara are different than wine grapes grown in other parts of the world, anywhere else, even within our own country. It's very different from British Columbia to Niagara. So ideas that may work best here may not be the best ideas in another part of the world. So sustainability, because it's such a wide umbrella, it's embracing, the concept of it is embracing of all good ideas. I think it has the best chance for success long term.
Well said. I think one of the things that those who are watching in on this or watching a recording, one of the things that they might not have a sense of, but I know, I mean, you kind of came into this as a family business at a time when everything was kind of taking shape. There wasn't a foundation, that everything, the landscape underneath you was shifting quite radically. But you're an independent business, and you pay your own profit, but you never really worked alone. I think that was what was great about the early adapters to quality winemaking, yourself and Cave Spring and Vineland, is that there really was a bit of a linked arm prospect and shared knowledge. And then Brock University and Cool Climate Enology Viticulture comes in, and then Niagara College, and we start to build a more robust community. What started probably as a couple of people jawing beside a tractor and sharing some insights, but the amount of collaboration and shared resources that the brain power that's been amassed in Ontario over the last 20 years is really something that we didn't have, because I think early on, maybe knowledge was power, and people kept that kind of information a little closer to their chest.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, that's one of the great things about the wine industry in our area. But I think it's a trait that's in most wine regions around the world, that there is very much a collaborative approach to it, particularly amongst estate-owned, family-owned operations, I think, because you have that long-term view of being stewards of the land. You're responsible to your neighbors. I mean, sustainability is not just your own immediate vineyard that you're looking at. I mean, we have neighboring vineyards and people living in and amongst our vines and our greater community. And so, I mean, we have a responsibility to be stewards of our own land, but our land and our choices impact our immediate neighbors and neighbors beyond that as well, actually. So it's a community. You need to be conscious of that, of your impact on your greater community. And but then also collaborating and working together to come up with best ideas. It's an evolving process. I mean, the practices that we practice now are different than 5 years ago and different than 15, 20. I mean, it's always evolving. I mean, technology and things become, also as they become available, better practices come available. You want to be continually improving and adopting new ideas if they're better. And I mean, that's one thing with the sustainable, I know with the sustainable winemaking as well, you're scored, and as we evolve this program, as the program is self-improving. So, you know, I understand, I think Jamie was mentioning in New Zealand, they started with a relatively low barrier of entry. I think that that's okay as a starting point, but a good sustainability program is the benchmark can then slowly be raised. I mean, it's a process as much as anything. And if you have the right framework in that process of self-improvement, you want to get people into it, as many people into the system as possible, and then start raising that bar, and you can do that over time. And collaboration is a big part, though, of helping everybody, enabling everybody to raise their game and raise their bar. We can help each other, share ideas. And the wine industry and our industry in Niagara has been amazing for that. And I credit a lot of our success. I learned a lot about grape growing when I was a kid for talking to my neighbors, from Gabe, your family that owns Cave Springs, Len, and a number of people, you know, the Bosk family, and a number of, you know, these early pioneers helped me, shared ideas. We all kind of learned together too.
No, that's great. Well, thanks. I'm sure we'll come back to you with some questions, and you've already alerted Gabe to get his head out of vineyard stats and looking at how much tonnage is going to be coming into Cave Spring. So yeah, welcome Gabriel DeMarco, assistant winemaker from at Cave Spring Cellars, and Gabe is son of a dentist who went to the Cool Climate Enology Viticulture Institute. Exactly what Canadian, what the aspirations for that institute was, to teach our own, to get into the industry and start improving on the wine quality. And in an enviable spot at Cave Spring Cellars, where he really kind of worked up through the ranks, working in the restaurant and serving tableside, now assistant winemaker at one of our classic estate wine producers, and having an impact in a way that maybe, as someone who, Matthew's made you part of the family, so you hold Len to that.
Yeah, thank you, man. I'll tell Len.
Yeah, that you now have ownership stake. You're not just an assistant winemaker, but as someone who's come in with fresh eyes, and at a time when auditing and assessing is so crucial. Angelo Pavan, self-taught winemaker who has made some of the most emblematic wines of our industry, of the Ontario industry. But yeah, you are able to come in with book learning and knowledge and have sway and have an immediate impact on operational aspects. So I guess ultimately the same question: what does sustainability mean to you in your day-to-day work at Cave Spring?
Yeah, I guess I'm the black sheep in my family. I'm the only non-dental related person, but I'm really honored to be here for sure. So and the nice thing about the relationship at Cave is, the tradition from the founding fathers, and then coming in, like you said, with the academic background, we've been able to kind of marry tradition and science, and then also implementation of outside techniques. It's been a great relationship. I guess to answer the question though directly, sustainability for me and for the winery is a commitment to never be comfortable or complacent with the status quo. So like Matt was alluding to, where we were when we started is not where we are today. and it's not going to be where we are in in next year or the year after, 5 years from now. You start to see, as time passes, maybe in 1 year it seems like a small change, but in 5 years you've made an evolution of changes, and then it looks very different than you were 5 years ago. And so again, like Matt was saying, there's some great points from Matt and Jamie about just like partnerships, and cost of entry doesn't necessarily have to be great, because once you have you're in and you're being audited, and you start to question processes, and you start to talk with your neighbors, and this collaboration is born between both industry, industry partners, industry, like say sellers of organic or modern sprays, academia. You start partnering in research. That conversation is crazy. It seems so simple to say, but that conversation, those exchanges of ideas, create dramatic results in terms of increasing fruit quality while reducing environmental impact. And that is key. We have to shepherd the environment. Not it can't be the same as when we started. It has to be better for the next generation. But the problem, it's all nice to talk about, but the reality is the very few problems have simple solutions. The answers are complex. So say if I were to wake up tomorrow and decide that we're not going to use chemical herbicides anymore, so what are we going to use? What is the solution to deal with the looming weed problem, which is something that is a real pest in the vineyard? They create added disease pressure. They create risk to vine health. They can overgrow it. So how do you manage that if you're going to cut out chemical herbicides, which are efficient and inexpensive? We all know about that stuff. And so the solution is never simple. And you have to worry about if you implement one idea, how much extra diesel fuel you're going to be burning. If you implement another idea, how many times you're going to have to pass through the vineyard. Is that going to affect soil compaction, which will then turn up downstream effects? So the solutions are never simple. They have various downstream effects. And so sustainability, though, like Matt was saying, again, there's a lot of great points been made, is the great thing about sustainability is we can take the best from all of the baskets. And so I've found that before this conversation started, there was the organic camp and everybody else. And those camps are kind of coming together in a lot of ways, because sustainability is taking the best from organics, the most sustainable from organics, because it's not a utopian universe in the organic viticultural world, and it's not. And again, overuse of modern products is also bad. It's like taking soft chemistry from both, reducing the amount of diesel fuel we use, reducing the sprays in the vineyard. All these things can be done when you take the best from all the worlds. Technology is a big deal. We're talking about being farmers and winemakers, and we are at Cave Spring, like Malabar and Henry Pelham and Stratus and Southbrook. Like we farm, and then we bring the grapes and we make the wine. And so that footprint has to be reduced in the winery or in the vineyard, and then carry into the winery. And I lost my train of thought a little bit, but the point is I'm ultimately trying to make is if you can do that and make better wine, and ultimately the vines will be healthier. I mean, that's really at the end of the day what we're going for. The vine health is linked to environmental health, and then that all comes together to make a better wine product. And so that can't be done. There's no simple solution to that, just like there's no simple solution to any political issue. It's complex. But that's the great thing about sustainability. It incorporates with welcoming arms, organic or biological approaches, scientific approaches, technical approaches, and kind of allows you to dig into the negatives of each, and then identify them, and then discard them if they're not, if they are, and then take the positives from each, and then you bring them together. It takes more work, it takes more scouting in the vineyard, it takes more research in terms of approaches that you use. It takes sometimes you have to change the culture of your crew, right? Because if you accept the status quo, you have people who are very talented farmers who've been farming for maybe 3 generations, and there's a way of doing things that they've been doing it. You then go in and say you're not doing it that way anymore. You see what happens there, right? You have to slowly evolve the culture around farming as well. That's something that we don't talk about a lot. Is that takes time. as well. But the great thing is if you do it properly, those people that were kind of resisting you at the beginning are bringing you ideas in year 2 and 3 and 4, you know, so it becomes like this collaborative process where everyone is on board, and fruit quality goes up, vine health goes up, environmental impact goes down, and then all that comes together fortuitously to better wine. So yeah, that's kind of the gist of it. So a commitment to never be comfortable or complacent with the status quo. That's how I define sustainability, and all the lovely extra work that comes with that.
No, it's you mentioned that, yeah, that's kind of there's like this a la carte menu of options that are available. You have to kind of figure out what makes the most sense for your task at hand and your ambition for what's going forward. One of the things that people watching might not know, because we don't know where they're coming from, and they could be watching from a quite great distance, is we're worried about fruit quality for sure, but the vagaries of our winter means the need to have healthy vines that can withstand putting them to bed for whatever might come what may, February, March, that sort of thing.
It's a great point. Because of our really, the winter is the #1 variable here, you know, and it's having your vine healthy. That means, of course, healthy from disease pressure, but also not overcropping it, overtaxing it with fruit, so that it can actually do what we want it to do, which is grow beautiful, ripe, you know, say Chardonnay, I'll pick a variety, but then also have the time to then acclimatize for the winter. And that requires a healthy vine. It requires it requires an understanding that this is a marathon, not a sprint. So every decision you make today, you have to kind of factor in its downstream effect, you know, 2, 3, 4, 5 years into the future. And that goes for everything, really. I mean, we're making a sparkling wine. We brought sparkling in last week, and I was thinking, how old am I going to be when I drink this wine? You know, it's going to sit on lees in the bottle for 3+ years. And wow, that's great. You know, so the winemaking industry is a generational thing. You know, it's if you know a winemaker, a grape grower, you know, if you're successful, you'll be fortunate to have 30+ vintages. Like, so you basically make wine 30 times. I mean, you make beer, you can make beer on demand, right? You know, you don't think of that, like you make wine once a year. And so that requires that forward thinking, which is not something that is it's not quite like so dramatic in other industries.
No,
I get my hand in the camera. I'm Italian. It's in my nature.
No, well, thanks for that. Keep your hands nimble, because we'll come back to you with questions for sure. And I do want to bring actually someone who probably belies a little bit of what you just said. The one way to have more than 30 vintages is if you start working other parts of the world. So want to bring Anne Sperling into the conversation. Anne, who in this capacity, we're talking about what her role at Southbrook Winery in Niagara-on-the-Lake is, but has so incredibly well versed in this topic. I should just stop talking and hand the conch over to you and to get talking. But I think one of you were popping into my head as listening to Jamie Goode talk about the struggles of communicating this, because I think one of the things that Southbrook has done so incredibly well, your work, and of course, you know, the valued ownership of Bill Redemeyer, is communicate what you do and why you do it on a very human level. So I welcome you to put a human face to sustainability, because I think that the newsletters and maybe the message for winemakers out there is to have an owner who will empower this to the nth degree, but also yeah, just to have a measured conversation with people, and it makes it real.
Yeah, so yeah, for sure. I think there's many ways of communicating, and you know, I think it's easy to have a long, complicated you know, dialogue and conversation, but for that to really sink in, there have to be some some things that you can fall back on that that are kind of shared understanding about, you know, what certain terms or what certain practices mean. And you know, certification is one way of doing that. And certainly, as Jamie pointed out, I know organics has communicated that quite well to consumers, and whether it's wine or whether it's, you know, produce or other things, over the years, people have come to know, to have some kind of understanding about organics, and in wine, certainly biodynamics has communicated that. And, you know, I think that's our challenge with sustainability in this program, the Sustainable Winemaking Ontario, is to, you know, create some kind of dialogue and understanding with our consumers. And, you know, that's as you pointed out, that can happen on a broad scale. So, you know, everyone knows what you're talking about, but also I think you have to put a kind of a human scale behind it. And that's where the, you know, kind of the individual conversation, like you're referring to with the Southbrook newsletters that Bill Riddlemeyer writes. So, and, you know, we've got a lot to talk about. There's not only the things that we do day to day, but there's the reasons behind it. And I think bringing out some of the points, are really important. And, you know, like Gabe was pointing out, what's happening with technology is really providing us with a lot of tools, whether it's improved mechanical weeding so that you can drive through the vineyard twice as fast and still remove, you know, the problematic weeds, or whether it's developing products like Cueva, for example, which is a copper product. It's uses saponification that changes the amount of copper that an organic spray vineyard might use with each spray, from 35% mix to 1.8%. So, you know, and it's still really, really effective. So, you know, there's those kind of things. There's biologicals that are coming into the picture. And I think, you know, without the research that was done in Europe that said, hey, why is it that children and in schools living beside vineyards in Bordeaux are getting a higher rate of leukemia? You know, that's the bad news, but the result is that it's made people work harder to find solutions that are, you know, a lot friendlier to their neighbors and to the farmers that are using them and to the staff that are in the vineyards every day. So, and, you know, at the same time, you know, probably, you know, making ferments better. There's, you know, by having less systemic residues on the grapes when they come in, you know, they're probably performing better in the winery and producing wines that are also cleaner. So
with Southbrook, and one of the things I think that it's interesting to see, you know, when Magdalena was introducing the concept, she was also talking about the other organizations that are of a piece but separate and distinct, biodynamics in particular. And so which you operate under, and there's your friend in the background, functioning as a certifiably sustaining and biodynamic producer. Does that produce more challenges, or does it make the end goal of both a bit easier because you're kind of moving in that same direction anyways?
Well, I think that the Sustainable Winemaking program covers, you know, whether we're certified with both the vineyard and the winery. It covers a broader range of topics. So with organic certification, for example, that's the overseer of that is the CFIA, so the Canadian Food Inspection Agency. So the main concern there is how we're growing and making the wines and making it consumer friendly, transparent, all of those kind of things. And to a much lesser extent, how we interact with the community around us, what we might be doing or not doing that's affecting what's kind of going off the property. Are we, they're not necessarily looking at what's running off into the ditches, for example, or how we manage our wastewater in the winery or things like that. And that's where the sustainable winemaking comes into the picture. It's got those social aspects, the how we're impacting the community. So I think that I think that it's filling in some of the gaps, and certainly there's some overlaps, but there's many of the modules that cover things that aren't covered by organics. And when it comes to biodynamics, there's other things that come into it, like the social aspect, but it's not kind of drilling down into the details. It's more, which is what the sustainable winemaking is doing.
Nice. And I guess one of the things that I think at some point, it's probably already been so well documented by yourself, but I think there's going to be some Master of Wine student or Brock student who's going to come and do. I know Jackie Bisson, Canada's latest Master of Wine, wrote a sustainability piece on what's happening at Southbrook for JancesRobinsons.com. But I think there's such a great case study to be made, because Southbrook was built from the ground up, quite literally purpose built to be exactly this kind of winery. And so there wasn't a need to backfill anything or work. It was established on these guiding principles. And to me, it's such a wonderful lab for Niagara and for the world of what sustainability and this type of wine growing can be.
Yeah, and you're right. We even in purchasing the property and selecting the site, the goals included being able to grow organically and biodynamically on the site, and looking at all of the things that would keep us sustainable. Location in terms of viticulture, but also location in terms of accessibility for consumers. An inviting property that would offer consumers a rewarding experience that hopefully they'd never forget. Architecture that's beautiful and inviting, but also LEED certified, so that the people working within the environment or visiting are seeing and experiencing an environment that's friendly to their health and to the experience. So, all of those things, many of those things were taken into consideration right out of the gates. And then some of them we've overlaid. So, for example, the area that we use for our water management and for our surface water management we've turned that into a diversity of plants to support beneficial insects. We use that as a way of communicating with customers so that they can see what we're doing from a biodiversity standpoint, but also, connecting that to, for example, the Monarch Watch, so that we have, our emblems that people remember and can take away with them, and whether it's to adapt that into their home gardens or just to add to the story and the experience while they're on site. So there's many things that were sort of ground laying, but then we've evolved to make it a richer experience and adding to that. So even to solar panels that when we built the winery in 2008, it wasn't obvious that was the best way to use sustainable energy or to capture sustainable energy. But with the developments that were made in the solar panel materials and how they could be set up and where on the property, those things all added up to be make sense later, but almost 10 years later. So now we've got that green energy that's driving the winery buildings now. So.
Nice. Well, hold that spot. I do want to talk to, bring in the last voice, and from a neighbor of Southbrook, just a little bit farther down Highway 55 to Stratus, and we want to bring Dean STOKYA into the conversation to talk about sustainability at Stratus, another early adapter of the certification process, and also another kind of young face in the industry who is kind of laying the groundwork for a sustainable wine future, not only for us to enjoy wine, but so he has a job in 10, 15, 20, 50 years from now. So welcome, Dean. Same question as always. What is Stratus? What does sustainability mean to Stratus and your day-to-day work?
Yeah, thanks, Chris. Thanks for having me, and thanks to Chair War and Wine Marketing Association for having me. It's an honor to speak today. Sustainability to us at Stratus, I think, is really expanding on the environmental impact from just our farm and our winery to the broader, community and the environment that's, around us, and really just trying to reduce waste going to landfills, or looking at wastewater going into rivers, streams, ponds, lakes, looking at sort of just outside of our little bubble here to a more broader bubble. Even to choosing glass and barrels can have an impact on a community across the ocean in Europe or in Asia, based on what you might choose from that. So I really think sustainability is very far-reaching. It's so much more than just this little microcosm that we're living in. It has so many more impacts for everyone living around us, our neighbors, but also the greater communities around us, which is very important for sustainability, I think, because we do live in this Niagara region, and we have this, one of the world's most famous rivers, the Niagara River, running right along us with thousands of acres planted of fruit trees and vineyards and orchards and everything else, all doing their farming techniques, which can either be sustainable or not sustainable. And we're really trying to work towards making that more sustainable and having less impact on these rivers around us. And I think in the wine industry, we get a lot of spotlight between winemaking and our vineyards, and there's a lot of tourism. Wineries really encompass sort of farming, manufacturing, tourism, and marketing, all these industries in one. So we get this great spotlight. And I really think that if you're in the paints and solvents industry or pesticides or what have you, you're not really provided platforms like what we're speaking on right now to kind of come in and talk about what you might be doing or what might be happening in your industry. We have this amazing platform to come in, and it's consumer facing, and they get to hear our story. So we're really primed in the wine industry to be leaders and come in and talk about these sustainable initiatives and talk about what we're doing to make things more sustainable and how we're trying to impact the environment, so that maybe some of these other industries who don't have this platform might follow along, sort of maybe they're tuning in today, somebody who works for these companies, seeing something like this and saying, wow, that's amazing, all these things that they're trying to do in the wine industry, and admitting, that, we could just try and gloss it over and keep, as everyone was saying earlier, keep the beauty to it and don't talk about what we're spraying the vineyards and try and hide that part of things. But we're kind of coming out, we're being open about it with these sustainable certifications and talking about what we could do better. And it's amazing to get this list when we go through the sustainable certification to sort of check off all these dots that you never even thought of before. So it's kind of just taking to that thing where even you might think you're doing the right thing, or you might say, my farm is already, it's not that bad. But then it's amazing to have this third party come in and go through 100 questions with you, and the wheels start turning to the point where I was saying, wow, what about barrels? What about glass? What about our packaging that the consumer is walking out the door with our bottles of wine? And what can we recycle? There's so many more things aside from just the winemaking and the vineyard, which is, as we've said, many other certifications really do cover that quite well. We're trying to broaden that and look at all these other important aspects of what that is.
I think it's always fun to see or visit a sustainably focused winery and hear the stories that of the decisions and some practices that have come from from the workers up, the people who are actually washing the barrels, who see a way of using way less water. Oftentimes it might mean an investment in a new pump or something, but the ripple, that there's an empowerment to this process. And as you say, the questions that come out of the audit that make you realize what you're doing simply because of muscle memory versus does this actually have value to it, what we do anymore.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. And we have here at Stratus a green committee with our staff on the green committee, and they come in and they bring those ideas, and it's exactly that. They're just our regular staff members here at Stratus, could be in the vineyard or the winemaking side or retail, and they bring those ideas. You know, we recently got a barrel steamer, so we've reduced our water usage in terms of barrel cleaning by 1 to a 10th of what we used to use for water. So things like that really, yeah, you're right. It comes from empowering your employees and really everyone in the community to come up with these new ideas. And that's the leadership thing, is that exact, it kind of starts to snowball. You start to think of what's happening. Hey, what about my glass? Maybe if I switch to lightweight glass, that's better for, waste in Asia or whatever, what have you. And those communities are benefiting from that. And that starts to snowball into this broad, that's really what sustainability is. It's taking everything and bringing that in one big picture. And as Gabe was saying, like it never ends, like what they do at Case Springs. The questions never stop coming. It's 100 questions now, and soon it'll be 150 and 200 until, like, it just keeps going. You can never not get better at being more sustainable. And time is of the essence. Everyone keeps saying it's really today, it's not tomorrow. The rivers are more, they're getting better, but they've been polluted by previous, misuse, and we really need to get behind this and start improving and getting healthier systems in place so that we don't do any more damage. That's the beautiful thing about nature, is it has this ability to heal. It's full of microorganisms, organisms, fungi. They heal. The rivers, the lakes, the streams, they will heal. And really what sustainability is stopping those self-inflicted wounds so that healing process can begin. Once we stop the pollution and stop the runoff and stop all these things, the nature can get back to work. It can get back to doing these things so that the water will be clean, will repair the damage that's already been done. And that's what's beautiful about nature, and that's what's great about sustainability, is we're trying to stop these self-inflicted wounds so that we can get back to better, more generations, so that these farms will last thousands of years, not 100 years.
Well, on that note, which is a very positive note, I'm going to just jump in here. First of all, to say thank you to everyone, and just in a minute, I'll ask Landon to pop everyone back on the screen. But before I do, I just want to actually answer two quick questions. Well, one of them is more of a simple question that came up that's easier to answer, because there is a person from California who is watching and asking how we manage, well, because they have water issues and drought and water shortages. So I'll just explain that our region is very different. We generally don't have water issues. In fact, we usually have humidity issues during harvest and rain. There are drier years for sure, but it's pretty rare that people need to irrigate. So it is a very different region in that regard. So I don't think we'll probably be able to answer that question for you on this webinar, but certainly afterwards, if anybody has any questions, please do, send those our way to any of us on the panel, and we can, I'm sure people will be happy to share information. So Landon, can everybody maybe pop up back on the screen for the last, literally there's 5 minutes. And what I've found really exciting is that I think we probably could have been talking about this for 2 hours. So, okay, so who else? Okay. It's like a video game. People are just popping up. And we got Anne back with her special cricket in her office, which the lucky cricket. Okay, there's Matt. Jamie, are you there on the phone? No, it's crickets from Jamie. Okay.
Yeah, I'm here.
Oh, you are. Okay, good. Okay, so I think, is that everybody? Everyone's there. So, I think a lot of great things have been said, and everyone from the industry and Chris has done a great job. I just think, Jamie, because again, you're the international perspective, and you kind of started off with some thoughts. Do you have any additional closing thoughts, or that have come up in what people have said, that you might want to add on? Anything?
Yeah, just very briefly, I'm just really encouraged to hear all this, because it's a sign of a wine region that's growing up and is very thoughtful and is looking to improve. And it's like there's so many aspects to sustainability that we've kind of touched on, and I think that's just I think yes, it's an internal discussion for the wine region, all the growers and winemakers in the region to kind of have, but I think also I just wish we could find really good ways of communicating this with normal people who buy bottles of wine from the VQA, you know, and who are, sorry, not for VQA, for the LCBO, you know, people just who are buying, you know, 20-buck bottles of wine, just and aren't really going to be reading wine publications. But is there a way to communicate this more clearly? And I think it's a really positive thing, and it's so multifaceted. So I just think that's a nice challenge.
Yeah, I think that's great, and I'm obviously passionate about this industry and have seen it from early days, and I think, you know, it's really exciting that all of us here today, and I know the others in the industry that are really working hard, we're all trying to get there. And yeah, I'm proud of what's happening in our industry, and this panel today has been really exciting. And so I think that is the next challenge, Jamie, and that's the one that we're working on, is the communication side of it, getting it on the bottles, telling it to the consumers, getting more people talking about it. So this has definitely been an important part of that, this session. And I think Terroir has been a great place to have this discussion. So hopefully this is just the groundwork that we're laying for future conversations. And I think we're literally at 2 minutes from the closing time when they're going to shut us all down. So thank you again to all of you. Thank you to Terroir, and hopefully happy harvest to all of you producers. I know you're out there in sketchy weather, but it's sunny now, so you never know. It's Ontario. It's fun times. So cheers. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Bye.